Path Solutions has over 2 decades of experience building network monitoring systems designed to give you total network visibility. TotalView's automation means it can be fully deployed and configured in minutes, monitoring every device, interface, and server in your entire infrastructure. And it goes deep, collecting performance, configuration, 19 different error counters, PoE, and QoS statistics on every single interface. Now, all of this information is automatically analyzed to produce plain English answers. Problems get solved faster because more information and intelligence is brought to bear. This is what total network visibility is all about. Knowing more about your network than with any other solution. TotalView is easy to acquire as everything is included in the core offering. NetFlow, diagramming, path mapping, server monitoring, network automation, IPAM, cloud service monitoring, and more. Putting your trust in a monitoring system can require a leap of faith. From inception, TotalView has a more secure architecture and build process that helps to protect their customers. Contact Path Solutions today, where you can learn more about their competitive upgrade program, Total Network Visibility, rapidly deployed. Find out more at www.pathsolutions.com. Tony, my friend. How's it going?
What's up, Jordan? I'm doing well, thank you.
All right. So it's been a couple weeks. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it was good. I'm glad I think we took the last week of December off to do some behind the scenes production and give ourselves a break here a little bit. And that was well deserved and well needed. And I'm glad we did that because we got a lot of cool stuff teed up to start this year off right. And it's very cool. And we didn't do last week because there was a huge interruption to our nation's schedule during our live stream. So by choice, we stood down for that one. That was important.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's glad to be back. I got the warm fuzzies again.
It felt a little weird to be going on and doing a fun light live stream while an insurrection was happening. So I think that was probably the right call to kind of pull back on last week. But it is exciting to get started again in 2021. Like you said, lots of planning going on around the show, how to do some things. Those who are watching obviously notice the ad up front. Right. So Path Solutions is sponsoring the live stream for this entire quarter. So thanks to them, it's really great. It allows us to continue to build this out to be a high quality production, to be able to do it regularly. And we're actually going to be talking to Tim Titus later in the show about Path Solutions. I promise and I swear we are not, going all advertising all the time on here. But what we wanted to do is we definitely wanted to introduce the product. And so we're going to do that later on in the show. We're going to do a demo of what that does and talk to him about what is a really good monitoring solution that's on the market. And so I'm excited about that. We have decided we were working on kind of like segmenting this show, right? Like, so I want to kind of explain some of the thoughts and I definitely want to, I think we want to call on our audience, right? So if you're watching right now, and I think we're going to put some stuff out to social media as well, I want to call on our audience because we're trying to name some segments. And Tony and I have been back and forth of naming some segments, and we've got some ideas. Most of them are goofy and they're a lot of fun, but I won't say that we're struggling. I just think that we haven't landed on something that's been like, it's got to be this name. And so I think we're going to crowdsource a bit here. So if you're watching, get ready to be creative because I'm ready to do that. So we have Naked Hardware, which was kind of like the first segment of the show. That's completely Tony's idea, just to give credit where it's due. And it's just this like really fun, like, we're gonna keep doing that, of course.
We got some already teed up to go through January, and so I'm really excited about that.
That's right, and so that's a neat little segment, and then we've got some other segments. So we're going to start doing some war stories. In fact, we're going to do our first one tonight, and I think we've agreed to call that stories from the subnet. I think that's what we want to call that one.
I like Tales from the Subnet.
Tales from the Subnet. It's like Tales from the Crypt. I don't know.
Yeah, if anyone's watching, weigh in. So we're kind of weighing on stories from the subnet, tales from the subnet as a title for our war stories segment. So what do you guys think?
Right.
Anyone out there?
I'd love to hear suggestions on that, because I'm not sure that we're sold on that yet. We're going to occasionally talk about news. It's not going to be a news show all the time, but man, there's a lot of stuff going on. And so we'd like to name that segment as well. And that's one that we've really struggled with. Like, we've been back and forth like for a while and nothing's really sticking. Like, I'm going to be very happy. In fact, I might send swag to the person who gives me a good name for a news segment that isn't completely lame.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. If anyone's watching, or if anyone sees this after it airs, reach out to us on Twitter or something. If you have a good name for a segment, and for a segment that we haven't already named, and we choose your name, if you have a recommendation and we choose it, I will happily foot the bill to send you some cool swag out your way.
Right. Absolutely.
I'd be happy to. That would be awesome.
So,
but I tell you what, when you're thinking of naming segments, everyone defaults to alliteration, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone wants to do like World Wide Web, right? WWW. Everyone wants to do this alliteration. So I'm burned out on alliteration, guys, but give me everything you got. Don't
feel bashful about submitting something that may have alliteration. I don't want to discourage people that have you're right. Good idea.
I should say I'm tired of coming up with my ideas, which all default to alliteration, and I'm just tired of it. So that's why I want to open it up. I think that's a great idea, Jordan.
Yeah. So we definitely should do that. With the idea, I mean, if you haven't noticed, I mean, we kind of flirted with the idea as we're building this out, but ultimately the plan is that we want to take these segments and release them as their own content, right? So if you can't catch the live stream, you can go watch the war story from last week. If that's what interests you, you can go watch the news segment. If we're talking about something specific, we're going to be having conversations about particular topics, right? And we'll release them as their own little thing. But the idea is trying to create the ability to pull some content out of this, so you don't have to watch a 2-hour long live stream after the fact, because it's a lot of fun when you can interact. I don't know about everyone else, but I don't really watch 2-hour long videos very often, unless they're like movie produced quality, which, as much as I am proud of what we produce, it's not quite that engaging or that entertaining. Right. So I don't have any misgivings about what people are actually looking for. And so we love that. And if you have an idea about a segment, something that we should do, that maybe we haven't thought of, or that we haven't, come up with, it's, please, speak up, because we'd love to hear your thoughts. So I think that's it. So how was your break? I mean, beyond us planning for Network Collective and all of that, did you have a nice holiday with your family?
Yeah.
And all that?
Yep. It was good. I would say, my family is, I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer or anything, but just to open the door to my background, I always say, like, I have 3 dads and 2 moms. I'm the product of like many marriages and divorces back to back. And so the holidays is basically just like a week-long road trip. And I don't mean I'm going across country. I mean, I'm just traveling across my state, back and forth, visiting different people. What was great about this year was, with coronavirus, me and my family are taking this very seriously. And so we didn't visit anyone, and nobody visited us. And so it was very low key. We did everything in-house. And when Christmas was over, like at the end of Christmas Day, that was the big holiday for me. It was over. See, normally, and all the other years of my life, when Christmas Day is over, I still have 4 more days of like going to so-and-so's house in the morning, and then catching dinner at someone's house, and then going somewhere else the next day. And it's absolutely madness. So this year it was very low key. We stayed at home. We celebrated. We had fun. My kids didn't miss out on anything. They got plenty of gifts. And, I felt wholesome inside. Everything was good. It really was good. But it was a little different. It was a little different. We did have some folks come and visit. We did have some folks come and visit, and we did a garage visit 6 feet away. We exchanged gifts as best we could. We put them in the middle of the garage. They wouldn't get them. It's pretty awkward to do things that way. But when I got my family's life at stake, it's important to take those safety measures for us. So that's what it was like. What did you guys do this holiday break?
It was very much the same. It was not family. We didn't get together with anybody. It was just our own. Now, typically we do Christmas at home anyway. So when we do Christmas, because we have, little kids and we're at that stage in our life where we have little kids of the family, we pretty much made a rule that we're not going anywhere. Yeah, you can come to us if you're grandparents because you don't have to lug everybody. And B, you're not coming first thing in the morning. You're going to come in the afternoon. So it kind of set some ground rules for family. Like we still want to see you, but lunchtime or after, so the kids can come down and we can enjoy our Christmas morning and don't have to worry about the logistics of getting family in the door, or have kids wait because grandma's on the way and they can't open their presents or whatever. So we, it wasn't all that different except for from lunch on, right? Like it was our normal Christmas morning. And then it was just, there was nobody who came over. So it was a lot of, I set up cameras in the living room so we could do Zoom on the big TV and everyone could talk to family, and it felt like it was, a little bit bigger and more life-sized, if you will. But yeah, I think that was, again, I think we've talked about it either, personally, I don't know if we've mentioned it on the stream, but my family's well set up for this type of living, pandemic living.
Yeah.
We homeschool. I already work from home. My wife doesn't have a job. So in that, we're used to being home most of the time. So this was just navigating yet again, something that was very much, that is just, normal life for us. I will say that it is getting to me, the whole, not being outside of my own four walls, right? I'm spending far too much time in my own little space here. And I think winter's doing that because it's not a lot of getting out. Although I've gotten out a little bit in the freezing cold in the middle of the night to take some pictures of stars and stuff. So, that's been fun, but it's not exactly a common occurrence because there's clouds pretty much every night. So, I mean, we had mentioned the fact of last week that we didn't run the show because of the fact that there was an insurrection going on, and I think that's it's interesting. But what I think is interesting, and I want to talk a little bit about this, Tony, is that there's more to this than just the political stuff that's going on. This has been one of the most televised, well recorded, and I know that there's people on both sides of the political spectrum, but this was criminal in so much as that it was against the law, right? This was going against the powers that be. And what's been really interesting from a technical perspective, watching the aftermath, is how unprepared people were from a technical perspective for what they were going to engage in. And so I thought it'd be fun and interesting to take a look and talk about some of the digital footprints as it relates to an insurrection or a coup. It's really interesting because we've never experienced this in America before, at least not in our lifetimes. And so, and we've never experienced it in the digital age. And so I think there's a lot of really interesting little tidbits that have been coming out. Now, I know you made a video, right? And I think I want to start with this video. So are you connected in? Yeah, it looks like you are. I'm going to put your desk up here quick.
Go ahead.
All right.
So first of all, if you can put my video in the corner, can you do that?
Yeah, I got it.
Yep. So first of all, I just wanted to say that this is about digital footprints of the digital footprint of a coup, right? And I want to say that in most of our national parks, right, they have a slogan or a saying on a sign somewhere, right, which is take only pictures, leave only footprints, right? And I just think that is so fitting for what we're going to discuss here, especially because the Capitol building, although it's a functional government building, it is sort of like a national park, right? There's the National Mall right there. It's the grounds are green, everything's right there. The reflective pond. It's a cool setting, and it very much is like a national park there. And during this insurrection, during this coup, that's exactly what these people did, right? They took pictures. And they left footprints. They left footprints by the means of digital footprints, right?
A lot of them.
And also those pictures that they were taking were also leaving footprints. So we'll get into that. So what I wanted to show you guys was there was someone who was doing live tweets of snap maps. Now, what snap maps are, if you use Snapchat, you're able to open up a snap map within the app, and it shows you a map of your locality, and all of your friends that you would normally interact with, where they are on the map. And if it doesn't show your friends, you can also zoom out and you can just sort of see a heat map of where other people are sending Snapchat messages from, right? Because it geotags those messages. And so what this person did is he focused his snap map on the Capitol and was able to catch in series screenshots of the heat map of people sending Snapchat messages as they moved in and around the Capitol building during the insurrection. So that's what this is. It's about a minute long. I stitched together all of his images. I'm going to go ahead and play it for you now. So this takes place from the timeline of 2:37 p.m. to 6:26 p.m. And that is from the timeline, the timestamps of his tweets. So as you can see here in the upper right-hand corner, it's a 2:39 p.m. That'll keep changing. And then I put the text of his tweet at the bottom. But you can see this is where people were actively participating in taking over the Capitol. We're sending Snapchat messages, and this was available to everybody. Those messages were being geolocated, and everyone can see this. So this is part of that take only pictures, leave only footprints. Well, they're leaving their digital footprint in more ways than one. So this is just one way, right? Snapchat should be able to go back into their logs and tell you every user that was sending messages at that time that was in that location. In fact, almost every social media platform that was used to send a message, a video, or a picture at that time, if the government wanted to, probably could subpoena them for those records, for those logs. Where were these users? Who was in that area at that time? So I thought this map was very interesting because it definitely shows the fluidity, the fluid movement of the crowd on both sides of the Capitol. And if you guys watched it, it actually shows them inside the Capitol building, sending Snapchats or snaps from inside the Capitol building before moving outside. And right here at the end of it, there was a curfew in DC at 6 p.m. So right before the 6 p.m. marker, if I back this video up, look how dark that is. That was when the police were starting to line up, getting ready for the curfew, and everyone was gathered along that front wall, right? I mean, we're seeing it right here. Now, this isn't representative of a one-for-one, person-for-person, but it's representative of those people who were sending messages at that time with Snapchat. And I think this is just one piece of the puzzle of the data you can gather on crowd movement.
Right. I think a key point that you brought up there was that the fact that, while this data that Snapchat is offering publicly doesn't associate the heat map with particular users, their logs do. Their logs absolutely do associate this user, this place, this time. And so it's interesting because one of the, again, social media hasn't existed for a mass scale insurrection like this. This is the first one that I'm aware. Again, in the US, I'm sure they've happened other places in the world. Sure. Right. Yeah. But in the US, so it's really interesting to see the data and looking at the fact that it's one of those things that I think your phone is a computer. It follows you. It's got unique identifiers that are associated with it. And that is your identity. And so if you were going to go do a robbery, the first thing you would do would be turn off your phone. But for whatever, you want to take my screen down? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. For whatever reason, the impetus this time was so many people were on social media. So many people were using their phone as a camera and recording what is this, this activity, which would be deemed criminal by most. And so I think that, it's just a really interesting dynamic, but it doesn't really stop there because then you extend it to the fact that, there's a website out there, Parler, right? That is social media specifically towards the political inclinations of the people who were there participating in this activity. Now, Parler is relatively new to the scene. It's not been out for a very long time. It came out as kind of a alternative place for people to go who have this political leaning to go and communicate with other like-minded folks. And I'm trying to do it as politically correctly as I can because I'm trying not to color it with my own.
Well, I tell you, before you get into Parler, actually, I want to back up to something you said, which was your phones, that people were using them to take pictures and videos. I think everyone probably in the world who was aware of what was happening last Wednesday saw some form of that. So we know that was absolutely taking place, right? Everyone who was there was using their phone.
Yeah.
But this goes back to your digital footprint. What digital footprint are you leaving behind just by standing in front of a building with your phone on record, right? What is being left behind? Your phone is constantly pinging the cell towers.
Right.
It's constantly pinging the cell towers, first of all, to maintain connectivity. And second of all, for a data connection, because all of the apps on your phone, they need to phone home regularly to check in. Does so-and-so have new messages? Is there new email? Is there new this? Is there new that? So they're constantly phoning home, asking for new messages. So there's that. It's always being pinged. Your phone also, if you're in the middle of the grounds of the Capitol, you're not at your home Wi-Fi. So your phone is constantly probing and beaconing for all of the saved Wi-Fi networks. Right. And we know this. Anyone who's ever played with a Wi-Fi pineapple or done any sort of Wi-Fi sniffing can pick up everyone's phone in the area beaconing for their own home Wi-Fi. So if someone had some listeners out there during the insurrection, they'd be able to capture everyone's home Wi-Fi SSIDs. And while that's not telling, that is one piece of evidence, right? When you couple that with some other information like, my phone is always tethered to my headphones via Bluetooth. It's always reaching out for that connection. NFC, you have to be pretty close to get NFC, but there are all these communication methods that have unique identifiers. Wi-Fi has unique MAC address. Bluetooth has MAC address as well. I forget what the identifier is that the cell towers use.
Right.
There's all this information, and when you put that all together, you can really identify someone's device.
Right,
and
absolutely.
put them at location. So that's just by taking your phone and throwing it in a field, right? It's still doing all these things. It's trying to find your home Wi-Fi. It's trying to find the nearest cell tower. It's trying to find my own headphones, even though they're not in range. It's trying to do all of these things. And if anyone had a sensor out there that was listening, you're leaving that footprint behind without even making a phone call, without even sending an email, without telling anyone where I am. My phone is leaving that behind.
Right.
And so that's one of the things. There was all those people, and everyone's phones are doing this all the time. So I wonder, if there are systems out there that are collecting this information during that. Maybe there were, maybe there weren't.
Yeah.
But this is just part of your digital footprint.
Right. It's the IMEI is what you were looking for the cell network. That's your unique identifier. Yep. No problem. But I think the point there is interesting. I think that also, thinking about it from the other side, anytime you talk about something that's security related or identity related, you want to look at it from both sides. As somebody who has a building that you need to protect like this, maybe there are mechanisms, right, to keep an eye on what's going on via collecting that information. Mm-hmm. I think that's very interesting. And an extension where I was heading with the Parler conversation, an extension of this is Parler, the social media site that is, specifically toward this political ideology. And a lot of people who were there were using this particular site. It was a relatively new site. And so it had been, kind of spun up in response to Twitter getting aggressive about trying to tamp down on what they consider to be fake information. And there's been a big political backlash, right, of people trying to escape the traditional social media mm-hmm. channels because of their moderation. So Parler, where this was touted as this place for, true free speech, we're not going to moderate you at all, which of course got them in all kinds of trouble, which was, you could see from 800 miles away. But the data was exfiltrated from that site before they were taken offline. And what they did is they did a couple of things that were very interesting. And this is true for most social media sites. Now, the mature social media sites maybe aren't doing this because we've had past interactions. But one of the things that Parler wasn't doing is they weren't removing the EXIF data from your photos. Meaning that
they weren't scrubbing them.
Yeah, they were not scrubbing your photos, meaning that you had GPS location, GPS location, you had time, other type of identifying information that was actually in the photo. So if you were to download the photo, you could go and look at it with an EXIF reader. You could pull all that stuff out.
The type of camera, the mechanics, the lens, everything, exactly. All the components of your camera. Yep. Yep,
absolutely. So a bunch of data about the device that it was taken on, where it was taken, and this information. Of course, there were a lot of photos that were taken that day from people who were there who were promised a sense of anonymity on this platform, right, that ultimately doesn't look like it's going to end up being true. The other thing that was that happened from there is obviously, a lot of people would, when they realized that they were in trouble, went back to go delete things that they may have posted. And, the old adage is true. Nothing on the internet ever goes away. what Parler was doing is rather than actually deleting the content, they were setting a bit to call it deleted. And then if that bit was set, not displaying it on the page. And so because of that, all that data was still in the database. So when the data was exfiltrated out, all this stuff, it wasn't, if you had as a user had deleted content, it now wasn't deleted. Like it wasn't actually deleted. And it's just really interesting to see the combination of social media, personal device, technical awareness, when it comes to the devices themselves. There's also a component to this that is about the security of the Capitol itself. And I want to talk about that for just a couple of minutes. Because the idea is, physical access is king when we're talking about security. So it doesn't,
physical access is king.
Once you're touching something, it's no longer secure. And we just had a whole bunch of random people walk into the Capitol. Now, most of them were political activists one way or another, but I'm just going to say something. If you are a foreign agent and you worked in Washington, D.C., and you weren't in the middle of that crowd, you were derelict with your responsibilities. Like if you're a spy from Russia, if you're a spy from China, if you're a spy from somewhere else, and you're here and you weren't in that crowd, like you have fallen down on the job, because there was an opportunity for you to walk into a federal building unsupervised that could have happened. Yeah, just walk right in. And so I am highly confident that there were foreign agents who were in the middle of all of this, who got free and wide access to our Capitol building. We know that there's been some equipment that's been stolen. I have concerns about that. And also it's not as concerning. I think that there's a whole conversation around that. I think it's probably not secure machines, the way that they're reacting. But when we were talking about this before, like they have to audit absolutely everything. They've got to go back and make sure that every device that's connected to a port is actually a device that they own and that they control. Because can you imagine just taking in a Raspberry Pi and dropping it in?
I was going to say, you take a Raspberry Pi in, or they have these things called LAN turtles, which are the size of a flash drive, and you just plug them into an RJ45 jack, and they show up online, and they can run commands. They can phone home. They can give someone a shell. They're pretty useful. It takes like 2 seconds to plug it in. You have to walk away. That's it. But
Capitol's a pretty big building. I mean, dropping that somewhere may not be the hardest thing. Maybe they have port security, but I mean, like, how many places have you been into that actually run port security? Like, not a lot.
So I think what we were going to talk about was, like, could you imagine being the night shift IT crew for the Capitol building and seeing that on TV and just going like, oh, now I need to generate the inventory list and cross-reference that against all the MAC addresses currently in the MAC address table, right? And making sure every piece of inventory is accounted for and identified. And I just think that was that's the big question. We don't know what happened with physical security. I mean, with the people physically occupying it, if anything could have happened. So we're all just speculating.
Right.
So we got to see a lot of people recording cell phone recordings on the news, on YouTube, on every social media platform, but we don't get to see the CCTV from inside the Capitol. There's security cameras, CCTV, there's stuff everywhere. Right. And we're not going to see that for a very long time, I'm sure. But I wonder what that sees. All these speculations that people say, well, so-and-so was over in the corner. Now, what were they doing? Were they plugging something in? Were they putting something under the desk? Well, what did those cameras see? That's kind of what I want to know. We're seeing it from the perspective of someone's cell phone, but what do the eyes that watch you, what do they really see? So we'll see how this plays out. But the whole point of this is, even though no matter what, you're leaving a footprint behind. Just like the saying from the national parks, take only pictures, leave only footprints. That's exactly what you're doing. Even if you thought you were being an anonymous criminal, someone that was going to get away with something by being just another voice in the crowd. Now there's a lot of data out there to be able to identify you personally. And actually, I just want to show one more thing. If you want to put my screen up, I'll just show one more thing, and then we'll finish here.
Go for it.
So this is a map of the U.S. This was just released a few hours ago. This is called the Parler map. If you see here, it's KyleMcDonald.net. Someone scraped all of the EXIF data out of the photos and videos that were uploaded to Parler and then siphoned out, and then plotted them on the map. And so this is obviously something you can zoom in very far to So actually, I went and zoomed in on my area, and I found
out your neighbors, didn't you?
Yeah, so wouldn't you? That's the first place you're going. So I'm going to my home, and I'm just outside
Don't
DC.
go too
but
far,
yeah,
Tony.
I found. No, I won't. But I found one person right in this area who's on the outskirts of my town, and not. Hey, I believe in everyone having their own political choices. Okay, but I don't believe in people being criminals. So I don't know what the nature of these postings were, but I thought that was very cool. So again, if we zoom into the Capitol, take a look at this. Right? Look at all this.
Look at that line. I wonder what that line represents. What two buildings are connected with that line? It looks an awful lot like the White House and the Capitol.
So isn't this data pretty cool? So this is just data. I mean, this is so cool. I love it. I love data. Yeah, that's all. I wanted to show it. It was hot off the press, so I wanted to get it out there. And if what I'll do is I'll drop some of these links in chat real quick, and we'll move on.
All right, sounds good.
Yep.
So I think that what we want to do next is I think that it's time. I think we want to bring on Tim Titus. So let me actually bring him on here. I think he's ready. Tim, my friend, how are you doing?
Howdy, healthy. I think that's the term of the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Tim, before we get started, I want to just, publicly here on the show say thank you for sponsoring the live stream with Past Solutions. It's fantastic. I'm excited to get to see what you've been working on in the product here. Before we get started, though, why don't you give a brief introduction of who you are so everyone else who's watching can get an idea who's presenting to them here.
Sure. So I'm a Chief Technology Officer and also founder of Past Solutions. My background is I've been a network engineer for over 30 years. There's a little more gray hair if you want to actually look a little closer, but I started back in the days of Coax ArcNet and Novell NetWare 2.10. So if anyone wants to sit down with me and share a beer and talk about those days, perfectly happy to do that.
The next conference we'll have to do that, Tim. That predates me by a little bit, not a lot, but enough for sure. So Tim, you're here to talk about the Past Solutions product, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you go. We're going to try to Tony and I are going to back away, let you present. We might ask some questions along the way, but we're going to try to hold back the questions to the end. We'll do a little bit of Q&A session, and that goes out to the people who are watching live right now. Watch, pay attention, ask the questions, and we will relay them in at the end. So without any further ado, Tim, I'm going to set up your desk as the presentation desk, and I'm going to let you go for it. All right, here you go.
Okay. Well, actually, Tony, something you just said is something to key in on is you love data. And the thing is, the same was true for me, is I figured switches, routers, gateways, firewalls, there's a ton of data that each manufacturer puts inside those devices that sadly, when it comes to troubleshooting, you have to go manually dig around because your monitoring solution doesn't show you enough data, and it also doesn't help you analyze that data. And I figured really what's missing from the market is the ability to have that information automatically scooped up, analyzed so that you can solve problems faster. And that's really the core of what we've built here. So let me dive in and really talk about what a lot of existing monitoring systems do. A lot of existing monitoring systems, you have to set up a collector, you have to set up and license a database, maybe you have to set up a couple of remote collectors, and then you have to go out and configure it to monitor your switches and routers. This typically is a manual procedure. If you miss anything, well, that's just a goof. Then you have to set up monitoring of individual interfaces that are interesting to you. And usually you want to make sure you don't run out of licenses here. But sadly, you only get so far before you have to get back to your day job of actually running a network. This leaves a lot to be desired because you have users that say, hey, I've got a problem, I've got an issue, and you check your monitoring system, and your monitoring system says, hey, everything's A-OK, everything's healthy. And you're left stuck having to log into switches, log into routers, check interfaces, check error counters, looking for configuration, looking for performance information, route paths, layer 2. So this just leaves a lot of people frustrated because you go look for this stuff and you still don't find the problem. and you have to tell the user, well, maybe the next time it happens, I can catch it in the act. And so you're stuck saying, I have less visibility than I need on this network. Well, this is where we said you need something different. You need next generation monitoring with integrated root cause troubleshooting. Here's what that looks like. You have a single deployment that scales far better, up to 150,000 interfaces, so you don't need to have multiple remote collection servers. It'll automatically go find every switch, every router, and monitor all of them, including every interface on every switch and every router. You're responsible for the entire network. You ought to have visibility that matches this responsibility. So we figure we're going to give you that. Now, in addition to broad coverage, we're also going to go deep. Your switches and routers and gateways and firewalls have a lot of intelligence that these manufacturers have built in, and we figure we're going to go automatically scoop that up. Performance information, configuration, 19 different error counters, all the QoS, CDP, LLDP, PoE, all of that information automatically picked up, brought back, and then analyzed automatically. What that means is we're going to produce plain English diagnostics of things that we find are broken in your network. That means that really within just a short amount of time of deployment, typically minutes, maybe an hour, we're going to start telling you, here is everything that your network equipment knows about what's broken so that you can start working on fixing it. That means you're going to end up being the genius on your network because you know what's broken and you're going to get it fixed faster than anyone else could manually go find this stuff. We can find cabling faults, duplex mismatches, VLAN tagging misconfigurations, QoS problems, spanning tree issues. All of this information automatically gets brought back so that you solve more problems. The core solution is a single integrated package that includes everything you need to run a perfectly healthy network. Path mapping, port mapping, server monitoring, inventory, IPAM, automation, a MIB browser, NetFlow. That way, one solution includes everything. Now, we have a number of modules that layer on top of this if you have a need, and the first module is telecom. So if you're trying to solve a call quality problem between a pair of IP addresses that happened earlier in the day, most of the time you're going to be stuck having to tell the user, I don't know. In our case, we can path map from any IP address to any other IP address. So we'll show you the links, the switches, the routers used along that path, and show you the health and performance of every one of those elements at any point in time. So if somebody comes up to you at 5 p.m. and says they had a poor quality call at 2:30, you can run a path map report and say, okay, your call was bad because we were dropping packets out of the high priority queue at 2:35, and 2 minutes later dropping packets due to a bad station cord. At that point, you know you can solve the problem by adjusting the QoS queue depth on your router, and then get a new patch cord to that far end connection. Thus, you get the root cause of the problem solved, even if it's two problems that are happening. In addition, we can do call simulations to be able to validate different parts of the network and put actual simulated voice traffic on the network to be able to say, what is latency, jitter, loss, out of order? Are we losing our DSCP tag? Are we having a pathing problem? Are we having a firewall blocking these packets? So we can end up doing this type of testing to find out what is the stability across your network to quickly determine where do you have latency, jitter, loss, or problems with voice. So we also have full visibility into QoS queues, SIP trunk monitoring. We can locate your phones, trigger alerts if people move phones, everything you need to run a perfectly healthy VoIP environment. Now, security is something that's really top of mind for a lot of folks these days. And this is something that, again, from our company's inception, we've seen as a core design practice. So we have a security operations module. This module has a number of features. The first one is SOAR. So if you have a SIM or an IDS that says, hey, we found suspicious activity on a specific IP address, typically what happens is you pull open your run book and say, I've got 30 minutes worth of work here to be able to research this. I've got 17 different steps. Maybe I need to use 12 different tools. And that just means that it's frustrating to be able to research all of your security events. In our case, we're going to tell you, here is where that device is connected. The switch, the interface, the VLAN. We'll tell you what it is, the operating system, who's logged in, what their rights and capabilities are, what's running on the box, who they're communicating with, and how. In addition, what is the risk profile of this communication? And then, do you want to quarantine this? If you had all of this information in front of you in one tool, within 60 seconds, you'd say, yes, quarantine this, I want it off my network. That means you're going to reduce dwell time because you know what's going on with these security incidents. Other capabilities we have in our SecOps Manager product is policy monitoring. Let's say you have a high security database that should only be accessed by a set number of users in a local office. And you've set your firewalls and ACLs to say, these are the only people who should access this. Well, if you set us up to monitor that policy, we can trigger alerts. If this happens, that way you know, gee, somehow your policies aren't being enforced. We can say, yeah, we're monitoring the policy and this communication happened. Here's a policy violation alert. Now, this is particularly valuable right now is you want to make sure that your monitoring servers aren't communicating with unsavory players out there on the internet, and we can do that as well. In addition, we do OS vulnerability detection. So all of the switches, routers, gateways, firewalls, we synchronize with NIST to determine what are the published vulnerabilities on these devices. So you don't need another tool to be able to do lengthy scanning and fingerprinting to determine what those vulnerabilities are. We just have a list so that you can go through and say, these are the 3 devices we need to upgrade or remediate. If you're reading your morning security news feed and you say, gee, there's a vulnerability for AudioPhone 335s, do we have any on the network? And you're scratching your head wondering, I thought we decommissioned them, but I don't know if we have any on the network. Well, with one quick search, we're going to tell you, yes, you have 3 of them, and here's where they're connected. That way you know what is inside of your network. Now, you guys talked about strange new devices popping into the network, and I thought, this is interesting, because if some new device, some mystery device pops into that network, within 5 minutes, we're going to be able to tell you, here's what it is, here's where it's connected, who it talks to, and what they're doing. Do you want to quarantine this? That way, those mystery devices that pop into the network, you're going to have all the information about them and be able to say, yeah, sorry, don't want this. So our SecOps product is layered on top of TotalView Core. It gives you geographic risk information, rogue device, IoT device monitoring, everything you need to know to say what is going on with communications in my environment. Now, the last module I want to talk about is remote worker troubleshooting. Now, there's a lot of folks who are stuck working at home, but a lot of IT folks are being challenged with helping people out. They may be tasked with being responsible for solving problems. They may be tasked with just, hey, you need to make it so that these people can work. Despite the fact that you're not responsible, you need to help them out. And you're stuck because there's not a lot you can do in many cases. Let's go through a sample scenario. So you have a CFO working from home. They have a poor quality Zoom team meeting. So let's scope the problem out. You have the internet. You have the Zoom team cloud servers, you have your headquarters, and you have the user's home office. Inside their home office, they have some unknown brand of firewall, unknown point, and their laptop. Problems can abound because you can have issues with wireless signal strength, wireless channel contention, cabling issues, firewall issues, ISP overload issues, split tunneling problems. So all of these problems can happen. And usually what happens is you say, well, let's see if we can set up a meeting and I'll remote control your desktop. And you find out, well, first thing is you got to schedule this with the user, and that's challenging. The second thing is that if you can't get the remote session established because their connection is too poor, you can't even help them. Even if you do get the remote session established, you're sitting there realizing, okay, what are the tools at my disposal? I have ping and I have traceroute. Okay, that's not a whole lot of capability here. So what we figured the right way to solve the problem is you send the user a single executable and say, here, go run this. What it will do is you can have the non-technical user have it fetch information from all of these different segments of the network, bring that information back, and then send that back to the TotalView server. And once they run that, you as the network engineer, you get a notification saying the lab results are in. You can now evaluate what the problem is. At that point, you go through the results and you can say, Okay, looks like your laptop is fine, but you got a wireless signal strength problem here. Let me talk to you about how to map your house out with this tool so you can find out where signal strength is strong and where it's weak. By the way, in your neighborhood, there's a lot of people using wireless channel 3. Let's change to channel 6 since nobody's using that. Your firewall also, it looks like it's a little $29 firewall. Let's get something that has a little bit more horsepower so it's not adding 20 milliseconds of latency. Also, your ISP is only giving you 4.2 megs of upload. Is that expected? Because if you're running 2 kids schooling at home at the same time you're trying to do meetings, you're going to have issues. So all of this information is automatically collected and sent back so that you can analyze it, and you don't even have to schedule a meeting with the user. So rapid troubleshooting of remote user connections, centralized reporting, centralized test prescriptions means you're going to get a lot of problems solved. So, Tony, Jordan, you got any questions about what we're able to do here?
We had quite a few come through, so maybe this would be a good time. We can do some Q&A now, and then we can do some Q&A after your demo as well. So let's pull up a few. The first question I think we got is, I'm going to bring it up here, is do you have MikroTik support? So I think the broader question here is, is there limitations to support for what you can monitor from a network infrastructure perspective?
So if the device supports SNMP, we're good to go. We go in and with our product, we will dig into the device and say, oh, you're a MikroTik, or oh, you're an Extreme switch, you're a Palo Alto firewall, you are a Cisco Nexus switch. So depending upon what the device is, we will use SNMP to dig at the device, much like a seasoned network expert would dig, to say, what do you support? Okay, you're a Cisco device. You probably support these custom Cisco MIBs. Okay, you probably support CDP. You probably support QoS. So we dig around to find out the inventory information, all that information about the device, and then bring it back. And we can do this digging exercise on pretty much any device made by any company. And even if we find some old 3Com hub that somebody puts on their network that is 20 years old, we can still dig around on that and still find some interesting information.
So I think in a similar vein here, and it wasn't simply monitoring on this question, it's simply SNMP monitoring. So the question is, do you do server monitoring, or is this SNMP specific? Or do you get into doing things like WMI or authenticated access to servers or anything like that?
Yeah, so our information sources that we'll use to collect is SNMP, we'll use syslog information, we'll use CLI information to be able to get into devices and backup configurations and be able to do automation. We have NetFlow and all the various different versions of NetFlow, V5, V9, SFlow, JFlow, all of that, as well as WMI. And also SNMP traps. So pretty much any of the standard culprits that you're going to find on the network, we're going to be using those as data sources. Okay.
Let's see. I'm looking for some other questions here. There was a question specifically about Lab. So do you have a trial or a free version that people can use to get their hands on it, to get some evaluation? Like how do people try things out?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, www.pathsolutions.com, you can contact one of our engineers there and we can get a proof of concept demo going for you. We can also get you, there's a sandbox. If you don't want to even go through that far, you can go to our sandbox and use the demo sandbox to explore the product and see how it works.
Okay. There was a question here. This is a great question, actually, from Matt Jenkins. And it says, they see MPLS on your diagrams. And this is always one of those things that we have to clarify, because MPLS is different for service provider engineers versus people who work in the enterprise. So when you mention MPLS, are you talking MPLS as in the service you consume as an MPLS link? Or are you actually capable of monitoring like the nuts and bolts of MPLS and some of the tagging and things that go on with that?
So I'll say most of our customers use MPLS as enterprise, and actually a lot of them are switching to just VPN tunnels and SD-WAN. So there's a bit of balance going on, or I should say rebalancing. Every time there's a new technology, there's a rebalancing. But we also do have the ability to look at it from the supplier side.
Okay. I had a couple of questions. You did mention automated discovery. Is that just CDP, LLDP, or are there other things going on there that are doing that discovery for you?
So this was one of my frustrations with a lot of tools, is that a lot of tools out there will say, okay, you've installed a database, you've installed the software, now you can spend your time configuring it, and you find out, gee, this is going to take weeks, if not months, to get enough data out of your network because of the amount of setup required. So one of the things where we figured is, if you give us subnet ranges to scan to find devices, find switches, routers, gateways, firewalls, anything that responds with SNMP, and you give us the SNMP credentials, we will discover all of your network infrastructure devices. And usually within the first hour of deployment, you're set up, you're completely done, and you're able to start realizing, gee, here's some problems that the product has already found, and you have your network diagram is done. You have visibility into what's working, what's broken, and you start learning more about your network simply because there's more data. Again, Tony, what you were saying about, you love data, and it's like, if you have data, but you also have to have data collected and also have it pre-analyzed so that you can come to the conclusion of saying, hey, I didn't realize that we were dropping packets on this interface because of a cabling issue.
Okay. I've got a list I was typing as we were talking. So, did I see that you have Pearl Hop? I'm sorry, Tony.
Excuse me. May I?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Sorry, with the delay, sometimes we end up speaking over each other. I was just joking around. But I had a question about the single executable. First of all, I think your solution is very cool. I think it's a very awesome monitoring solution. I like you guys' approach to it. But one of the things that I think sets you apart from other players is I love this idea of being able to send a user a single executable, gather information from their perspective, and be able to report that data back so that me as an analyst or an engineer or an operator, someone who's handling a help ticket, is able to understand what's going on from the client's machine. So my question is about that. The single executable, can that be run in user space? Does that need administrator privileges? And how often do things get added, or when does that get updated and stuff like that?
Great minds think alike, Tony. That was on my list for sure. I wanted to know what kind of privileges are needed for that executable.
So this is our first go out into the market with that capability, and we're finding incredible interest in it because of all the work at home users. It does require local admin rights to be able to collect the information. If you don't have local admin rights, we also have WebRTC as a method of collecting a more limited amount of information, because it doesn't have the same rights to be able to get that information. But for any browser, any modern browser on any operating system, it's still going to be able to get you a limited subset of information through WebRTC. As far as, where did we come up with the idea of doing this single executable is, we kind of looked at it and said, gee, right now you go to the doctor and the doctor says, I want these 17 different lab tests run on you. You don't go to the lab 17 times, and the doctor certainly doesn't go with you to the lab. You go down to the lab and they do one blood draw, and then they come back and the doctor gets notified when those 17 results come in. That way the doctor can review the information and say, oh, here's the problem. You're eating too many Big Macs and you need to cut back on that. So it's the same sort of thing where you're not wasting the doctor's time, and in this case, the network engineer's time, of trying to schedule the meeting and trying to tell the user, well, do a trace route and send it to me. Oh, trace what? And deal with a non-technical user. You have something that will collect that information automatically for you, and you can sit and look at all the results and say, I found the problem because you've got a wireless signal strength problem. Are you doing this in your far corner of your backyard? Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe you should move inside the house closer to your AP.
And another piece, just to tag on the end of that, is the executable signed? Who's it signed by? Because a lot of enterprise policies won't allow you to run unsigned executables.
Oh yeah, we have these signed. It is signed by us. This is all very core to what we're doing. Is again, it's a and by being a single executable, it means we don't have 400 DLLs that are floating about that we need. We can have one process that goes through to make sure that our code is our code.
Okay.
I have a question. I mean, we're talking about executable. That makes me think it's Windows. Is it Windows only? Are you guys building processes for remote users with Mac or remote users that may run Linux? I know not many people actually run Linux on the desktop. We can make the joke here, but I'm just curious. What is the what is the OS support for that remote executable? You said it's new, so it's understandable if it's just Windows for now.
We figured we'd start on Windows and offer the WebRTC capability. So again, WebRTC has some pretty interesting stuff, and by being just you use it through the browser, it means you can sit there with a cell phone. You can sit there with whether it's Android or iPhone or whatever, as long as it is a modern browser on Mac OS or Linux, you're going to be able to get test results and see what is the stability of your connection.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you do have, a subset available across the board, the executables Windows for now. That makes sense. I did have a question also about support for vulnerability detection. So you mentioned the idea that you can go out and scan the network. You have all the OSs kind of documented, and you're going out and referencing it versus NIST. Obviously, for OS detection and fingerprinting, that's not traditionally been 100%. It's close, but not full. So I'm curious if you have a list of supported devices that fingerprint correctly all the time. Is there any way to add devices to that list manually in case it doesn't fingerprint correctly? Like what does that process look like?
Yeah. So we, as part of our build process, we have a continuous improvement on that front. So it's effectively every time we do a new release, there's additional fine tuning of that. And I'll say on the Cisco side, we got that locked in. Palo Alto, we got that locked in. Extreme is pretty good. Juniper is pretty good. There's a lot of other players out there in the market that we might not have as locked in. But in general, I mean, I can show you this as part of the demo as far as how much information we have. And it's part of our digging process that makes us so that we're a bit more accurate than a lot of other players, because we know how to dig inside the device to say, okay, I know you're saying you're a Cisco device, but really, what are you? Okay, you're a Nexus device. Okay, great. What are you? Okay, you're a Nexus 9K. Okay, what OS? We keep fine tuning that. With just our digging process to be able to learn more about what that device is, to be able to get you more accurate information.
Okay.
Generally, our whole practice is try and reduce or remove the administration of the tool. That way, as an engineer, you're using it to solve problems, and you're not having to spend a ton of time maintaining the tool.
Okay. I did see something else I wanted to ask about. Did I see that you have like per hop latency validation? Like you were showing like different hops of the network between two devices and kind of laying out not only the path, but then like what latency is between those two specific devices. Is that correct? Or is it from the endpoint to that particular device?
It's the endpoint to each of the devices along the path. So if you have 7 different router hops to get to a destination and you're wondering, okay, we're losing packets somewhere between A and B, and you want to find out where are the packets being lost, we can tell you this is where your loss is occurring. This is where your latency is occurring. This is where your out of order is occurring, so that you can determine along that path, your first 3 hops are rock solid. You have no out of order packets, low latency, low jitter, no problems for those first 3 hops. It's really hop 4 is where your packet loss is coming from, and hop 4 and 5 is where you're starting to see a lot more out of order.
I have one more question, and then I'm going to let you, unless Tony has any more to add to it.
No, let's get to the demo.
I've been peppering you. I definitely want to give you some time to get to the demo. The SecOps you mentioned was something that layered on top of the core product. Is that like a separate license, or is that part of the core component? Because I know you offer a ton in that core component, but you did say that, so I want to make sure that I understand that clearly.
Yeah, so the way we do licensing is it's actually very different than a lot of other products. A lot of other products, they're going to nickel and dime you for, you want IPAM, write us a check. You want NetFlow, write us a check. And we're figuring, no, if you're a network person, the core is going to include everything you need as a network person. If you want the security features, that is an optional module that you can enable, and it's really just a software key that we enable, so it's not even a separate installation. The whole installer, which is about 80 meg, so it's a very compact installer, to let you guys know, we're kind of proud of the fact that we've coded everything in C and C++. So it's very compact, no bloatware here, very efficient. And what that means is we have far better scalability than other products. But what this means is we can turn on that SecOps capability with just a license change. We can turn on remote worker troubleshooting with just a license change. And that means that support is a lot easier. It's a single integrated package. There's not another installer you have to install. And it doesn't get ugly and complex. It's just turn on a license key, you've got the features.
All right. Well, we continue to have a bunch of questions rolling in, but I'm gonna set the line here because I definitely want you to get to actually showing the product, because it's always better to see it in action than it is to just look at slides. And then what we'll do is we'll continue this Q&A after everyone's had a chance to actually see the product in action. Sound good, Tim?
Great.
All right, go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to go into a demo of what TotalView is all about. So first thing is, it's a very compact installation. So it's an 80 megabyte installer. It's going to download, install on any Windows OS. It has its own database built in. We use SQLite as a database, so it's compiled directly into the application. So there's less security problems because there's no exposed ports. It's also fully self-supportive, so you don't need to get a DBA involved and say, hey, can you create a database and can you get licensing? All that's gone. It's going to install and immediately get to work and go through and find all of your switches, your routers, your gateways, your servers. And as it finds devices, it's going to start digging into each device to find out not only what it is, but what its capabilities are and what sort of information it has to share. This information is stuff that any seasoned expert network engineer would want to know. So very quickly, we're going to put red dots in front of things that have problems. So we have a red dot in front of the Syrah switch. We can click into that switch, and we're going to see all of the interfaces on that switch. We see interface 5 has a red dot and 4% packet loss. Now, just because we found an interface that has packet loss, most people would say, well, if that's a printer or a photocopier, I really don't care about packet loss to that, which is appropriate. But if this is a trunk port to another switch, or there's somebody's VoIP handset here, or this is a video conferencing unit, or there's a critical server plugged in here, that changes everything. So you want to find out what is affected by this packet loss. And to that end, we expose all of the CDP and LLDP information, if any, is present on these interfaces. We also have a fully integrated port mapper. Click on the Connected tab, and it's going to say, gee, that interface has one MAC address. That one MAC address associates with the HQ Voice VLAN, VLAN number 110. This looks to be a Dell computer with this IP address. And, oh, wait a minute, that's the voicemail recording server. Okay, now I know what this computer is that's affected by this packet loss. I'd say this is a high priority problem. Let's go see what the problem actually is. We click into the interface and we see the utilization graph. We go down and look at the packet loss graph and say, yeah, this happened right around midday. Okay, that's bad. And below that, we have the plain English prescription. And here we're being told that we have a cabling fault. So it's that fast and easy to recognize that we have a problem on the Syrah switch, a problem on interface 5. The problem relates to packet loss. It affects this voicemail server. Here's when the problem started, here's when it stopped, and here's what the problem is. Now, one thing to recognize is that a lot of other network monitoring products might not even be aware of this problem, and they're going to say that the interface is healthy. Here's why they'd say that, and here's why we say differently. If you click on View Error Counters, it's going to show all 19 of the error counters that we're automatically tracking. Other monitoring products, if they're even monitoring the interface, they're going to say that the interface is healthy because they're only looking at inbound errors and outbound errors. In our case, with looking at all the errors, we can say, no, actually, it's not that healthy because you're dropping a ton of FCS errors, you've got some deferred transmissions, some outbound discards. Oh, and by the way, here's what all of this means along with the configuration is you've got a cabling fault. That way you don't have to go crack open the books to find out what does it mean when you have FCS errors and you have no alignment errors on an interface together. We're able to tell you, you've got a cabling issue. If you had FCS errors with alignment errors, but no collisions on either a 10 or 100 interface, then we'd tell you, hey, you're on the full duplex side of a duplex mismatch. So it automatically interrogates and determines, here's what the error counters mean so that you get the root cause of the problem solved. We also have an engineer's library built in. Click on the error counter and it gives you the official IEEE definition, a more basic lay definition, and then all of the different causes as to where this can come from. That way, you get the problem solved quickly. One last thing to realize, though, is with all of these error counters collected on every interface of the network at every 5-minute period, what this means is if you drop or buffer even a single packet anywhere in the network, any point in time for any reason, we know about it. So if we put this together and say, okay, we had a problem just before noon today, and that problem happened between this user's PC and this server. Now, this could be a phone to a phone, PC to a server, video conference unit to video conference unit, any two IP addresses, and we can path map it to show here's how these two devices connect to each other and what happened along that path. Here's the PC. Looks like it's plugged into the Pino Layer 2 switch connected to interface 7. That interface looks perfectly healthy. Again, by our definition, perfectly healthy means perfectly healthy according to all 19 error counters. Other products, if they say that it's perfectly healthy, but it's only perfectly healthy to 2 error counters, sadly, you could have collisions going on like crazy and not be aware of it. Outbound, we can see it's going out interface 25, and there's some utilization, but there's not 100% utilization, so there's more bandwidth available, and there's no packet loss. So that's a healthy interface. Looks like inbound and outbound on the Syrah switch looks good. Uh-oh. Outbound on the Burgundy switch, going out interface number 3, we can see right before noon, we were dropping 6% of the packets. So at this point, we'd click into the interface, read the plain English prescription, and get the root cause of the problem resolved. So it's that fast and easy to find out between 2 IP addresses, looking at all of the error counters, all the QoS, all the configuration, all the performance, you can find out which interface had the problem and get the root cause of that problem resolved quickly, no matter what point in time it happened. Other features we have is we have a dynamic network map. This updates every 5 seconds, so you have a live look into what link utilization is and reachability so that you understand what's going on with your network. We have an automatically generated network diagram. This will end up showing how your network connects. You can move elements around if you want to. You can lock elements in place. You can download all this to Visio, so you have a very quick understanding of what's going on in your environment. For all the devices, we have a lot of information automatically collected as well. Traffic levels, PoE information on switches, spanning tree information, inventory information, full internal descriptions. We can automatically back up configurations on devices, no matter what the manufacturer is. All of this information automatically collected. If you want to see the issues, anything that is broken in your network, you can go to the Issues tab and say, okay, these are interfaces that have misconfigurations, incorrect subnet masks, interfaces that are dropping or buffering packets. And the point here is that a lot of folks are stuck running networks that really are full of mystery. They don't know enough about their network. We figure if all of that information got brought back, analyzed, and then presented to you, you'd march through this list, and if you spent 10 or 20 minutes solving each one of these problems, by the end of the first week of deployment, you'd be able to say, I know everything my network equipment knows. We've got built-in NetFlow. Any interface that's sending NetFlow, you can end up clicking to see who was using bandwidth at that time, and it's going to show you all of the flows that occurred at that point in time. TOS settings, ports in use. Built-in IPAM. You don't have to separately license this. This is going to show you all of the subnets that are in use in your environment, how they're allocated. We integrate with Microsoft DHCP to show their scopes so that you can see statically assigned addresses and, down in the purple section, the DHCP scopes along with release times. Our telecom module will show you where your phones are. You get to track MOS scores, QoS configuration, see what's going on with SIP trunks as far as latency, packet loss, status, and also route path. That way, if you're curious to know how stable is this connection and what happened at different points in time that caused that stability to be bad, like huge latency spikes, you can be able to track what happened over time. We have a license unlimited call simulator. And again, this call simulator can test your network and find out what is the stability of the environment for sending voice calls through. So if I want to do a test call, it's as easy as putting in the IP address, and I can choose a G711 codec. Let's turn some DSCP on, and we can target anything that responds to a ping. So I can ping my local gateway, I can ping a firewall, I can ping the far end of my MPLS network and see what is stability to that location and back. Well, it looks like across my MPLS network here, I have no stripping of DSCP, so my DSCP tag is not being stripped. I have no out of order. I have reasonable latency. Jitter is under control, no problems with packet loss, and some good MOS scores. I can do a load test and find out, can we handle 6 simultaneous calls on this link, or are we going to have problems? Well, we get up to 6 calls, everything looks stable. Wonder what happens if we put one more call on this link. Can we handle 7 simultaneous calls? Well, the answer is no, because 6 calls was stable, but when we get up to 7, our latency is climbing up through the roof, packet loss is really bad, and our MOS scores just dropped off a cliff. I'm going to switch and talk a little bit about our security module. On the risks tab, this is our SecOps capability. So if you have a SIM or an IDS that says, hey, we found a suspicious IP address, you can just put that in here and click search. It's going to find that device and say it's connected to Syrah interface 23. We click here and we can see, okay, 10.0.0.10 is connected to the Syrah switch interface 23. It's associating with the default VLAN, and we're starting to learn about that device and say, okay, it's a Dell computer. It has a reverse DNS name of Daphne. Now I can do a mini port scan and find out, gee, this device responds to Telnet and SSH. So there's something in there listening for that. And I can click here and it will launch the browser's Telnet or SSH client so I can start interacting with it. Also, if Nmap is installed on the computer, we integrate with Nmap so that you can say, do a full scan here. Here's the Nmap command we're going to run. And looks like Nmap is starting to show that this computer is some sort of Microsoft computer. Okay, so we can start fingerprinting that. In our case, though, we don't even need to bother with the Nmap because we know, because we're integrated with Microsoft Active Directory, we know that Daphne is a member of the Active Directory domain. Therefore, we're going to show a domain link. You can click here, and we're going to show that this is actually a Windows 2016 server. It's running VMware. We get to see a live look into CPU, memory, disk I/O, network I/O, and who's logged in. We get to see the rights of each of these users to determine what is the risk profile of what's going on. We get to see the processes to see who's running what on that computer, along with the CPU utilization, I/O read, I/O write, as well as who kicked off which process. We also get to see all of the flows going to and from this box so we can determine, well, it looks like it's talking to some server in Chicago. Okay, that's Salesforce, that's acceptable. But it looks like it's also talking to some server in England, and that's Virgin Media. Okay, that's suspicious. So we know all about what's going on with this box, what's running on it, who it's communicating with, and if we need to, we can immediately come over here and shut down the port and thus quarantine that computer. So that's as fast as we can be with being able to do SOAR because you have all of that information right in front of you so that you can render a decision really quickly. Now you asked previously about vulnerabilities. So here you can click on these 21 critical vulnerabilities. It's going to show us all of the devices. Here we have a Cisco ASA. It's running 8.2 Rev 1, and we've identified a critical vulnerability. We can click on details, and we'll be able to see all of the vulnerabilities along with the CVE ID, the full description, the publish date. You can click on the CVE ID. It goes straight out to NIST. So it talks about that specific defect so that you can say, okay, here's the vendor advisory on what to do to remediate that. So all of the information to be able to resolve the vulnerabilities in your environment. We also look at exposures. So we analyze the network to determine, hey, you've got 143 unencrypted HTTP servers. That's a bad practice. You've got Telnet in use. That's a bad practice. You've got 9 uncontrolled DNS computers on your network. Uncontrolled DNS is, these are guys going straight out to the internet and they're not using your corporate DNS infrastructure. So that Daphne computer, for example, it's going straight out to Google for its DNS lookups. That's bad. It should be using the corporate DNS. Last thing I'll touch upon is our ability to look at geographic views. So here we can see that there's 19 flows going to Nigeria. We can click in and end up seeing all of those communications and find out, okay, it's going to Lagos, Nigeria, and it's coming from this Calvin computer, and it's going out via SQL. So this is a SQL data exfiltration attack going on. We're going to go in and shut that down. One last thing I'll touch upon, though, I know is one last, but new devices. And I think this is something, as you were talking earlier about in the Capitol, is somebody plugs something in, how quickly can you detect it? And within 5 minutes, we're going to pop that up on the list and say, we have never seen this device before. So here's a couple of new VMwares that virtual machines we created. But if something new pops up on this list, you can get an email that notifies you and says, hey, something with Lite-On Technology Corporation with this MAC address just popped into your network. And we're going to tell you where it is, what it is, and you can end up connecting to it, find out maybe it has a little web server, maybe it has Telnet enabled, and you can start learning about what that device is. And you can choose to whitelist it, or you can end up quarantining it. So that's the short and sweet of what we're able to do in an automated fashion. You can have all of that type of information within the first hour of deployment. And again, the trick is the faster we can automate collecting the information and the faster we can put the pieces together, that means you solve more problems in your network and you're spending less time administrating the tool.
Yeah,
so I'd like to open it up to questions.
Oh, they kept coming in for sure. So we've got a list for you again. I hope you're ready for the rapid fire. I think that the first one we'll start with is actually one that came from the first session, and it's about scale. And then you mentioned in this one that you're doing, I think you said SQLite is the database behind the application. And so what does the footprint look like? This is from Laz. What does the footprint look like for like a 1,000 node network? Like what type of machine are we talking about? And what does it look like? Because you're collecting a lot of information.
Okay, so for a 1,000 node network, what I'd recommend is a 10 or maybe 12-year-old Centrino laptop with maybe 1 gig of RAM.
Okay. So you're saying you're efficient. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So a modern server. So, you know, I don't even know how to quantify that today, but the idea is I'm going to go buy something off the rack. I'm going to spend, you know, $5,000, maybe $10,000 on a server. Like how much horsepower do I need to run a decent sized network? Or is it that just your average everyday run of the mill box can run more nodes than whatever? Like help me get an idea of what that looks like.
So I'm going to say most every one of our customers, they just pop a virtual machine into place. They'll give us 2 CPUs. They'll give us 4 gigs of RAM, maybe 8 gigs if they want a little bit more room. But we have customers up to 150,000 nodes, and they'll monitor that with a 2-processor, 8 gig of RAM machine with 50 gigs of disk space. And if you're smaller than 150,000 nodes, you really don't need a whole lot. And part of our argument there is we're looking to save you money so that you're not having to say, gee, I need 12 machines deployed around the environment. I need to have a SQL Server database license. I need to have all of this complexity. That just costs your company money. And I figure one virtual machine that's a sliver of a footprint doesn't take a whole lot, and it's going to be far more better performance than what you get out of a lot of other solutions.
I think you covered this already, Tim, but the installer to install this as a server, right? we have to have it has to be installed on a Windows machine. Does it have to be installed on Windows Server or Windows Desktop or what?
It can go on a desktop. So we actually have a license model of this that works for people who are going into customers where they drop in with their laptop, plug in, and say, let me analyze your network. And really within 20, 30 minutes, they're able to say, hey, we found a whole bunch of problems. Here's your network diagram. Here are some security exposures you have. Because of the automated collection, it means you can sit down in a customer's environment. As long as you have SNMP and as long as you have the proper credentials, you're going to be able to do an instant analysis of what's working, what's broken, what does the network diagram look like.
I want to bring this one up because we were talking about size and scale, and I want to bring this up. So, like, what is the retention for 50 gigs? Because you're doing a lot with flows and things that are historical in nature that tends to collect up over time. So, you mentioned that 50 gig spec. I would be curious, like, what would you expect from a retention perspective on a machine like that?
So I'm going to put an asterisk in here. So the data storage for the network monitoring part is 50 gigs, and that is for the 150,000 nodes, and that is for 13 months of information. So that gives you the ability to compare this month, this year to last month, last year. That does not include NetFlow footprint. NetFlow footprint is something that usually you can determine how much NetFlow you want. You can put 10 gigs allocation towards it and say, okay, based upon the number of flows per second you're getting, that's 2 days worth of information. If you want to store a week worth of NetFlow, then you just do some calculations and say, okay, we need 40 gigs to store this. So the NetFlow is really a separate a variable than what the SNMP data storage is.
Right. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I got another question here, specifically around air gap networks. So I know that in Network Collective, we've got a bunch of people who work in, military or defense or government networks that have to be air gapped or energy or whatever, right? So how well does this work if the monitoring system can't check out? Because you mentioned we reference NIST and we reference some other things. So obviously there's some online components. What does it look like on an air gap network?
So if you have no internet connectivity whatsoever, and we do have customers that operate that way, and for obvious reasons, I can't share their names. And
yeah, that's usually the case.
So in those circumstances, really, you have the NIST information that what you can do is you can copy that NIST information off of NIST's website and say, let me drop that file into the appropriate directory inside of our server and do that on a monthly basis manually. And that way you'll have all of the latest NIST. So it doesn't have to be a live feed if you don't want to. So there are processes that you can put in place that ends up filling in that information. So it can work perfectly fine having all of the, I shouldn't say all of the umbilicals. We have effectively 5 connections to the outside world. We have a license check-in. We have a blacklist download that really does, it can be there or not there. You can manually copy the blacklist if you prefer. You can copy the NIST information if you prefer. So we have a well-published list of what our connections are to the outside world, and every one of those can be shut down.
So, and all of those procedures are documented so that someone could go out and look and figure out how to do that on their own? Awesome.
Yep.
Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the question there is probably stemming from the licensing aspect. Cisco Smart Licensing was a headache for those of us in isolated networks. We had to run our own little smart servers, and it was a pain, an absolute pain. So I think that licensing feature, that licensing check, making sure that gets disabled, and that this software still operates as the license that I've purchased perfectly fine.
You don't need any weird license server or anything. It's a file that we will give to you and say, put this file in this location, and it will do its job and say, you are happy, you are licensed. I think part of the difference is that our team on our side, we've worked as network engineers. We've been frustrated by all of these sort of practices that are put in place by either, dare I say, well-intentioned business people, but they just don't get it, or programmers that, again, don't get it. Because we've worked as networking folks, it's like, no, I just want a file. I don't want to set up a license server. I don't want complexity. I want something that works and is easy. And that's kind of our whole intent. Make your life easier, because network engineers, their lives are hard enough as is.
We had another question from Laz. Laz is apparently very curious about your product, because he's asked quite a few good questions here. This was brought up as you were demoing kind of the path troubleshooting, right? So we picked two nodes and kind of take a look at all the interfaces and all the components between two systems. And his question, and it's a good one, is how does this work with firewalls in between? Like, what needs to be open? Is it just SNMP, or are there other things that need to be open for some of those troubleshooting things to operate so we can get that data?
I'm going to say SNMP for the path map. All we need is SNMP information, because what we're doing is we're picking up routing tables, we're picking up ARP cache, we're picking up spanning tree, bridge tables. So we're able to determine connectedness. And this was an exercise many years ago for us. Is we sat down and said, if you had a routing table and you had a bridge table and you had ARP cache and you had all this information, could you path through the network? And we did it as a manual exercise and said, yeah, the data is there. Let's do it.
Someone apparently really wants to talk to you, Tim.
Yeah. More likely it's a late evening spam call is my guess.
That's funny. So one of the other questions we have here is from Matt Jenkins. And he asked specifically is, can the system have different devices, interfaces be pulled at different intervals? So I have a critical system or a core that I need to pull on a more frequent basis. I have something sitting at the edge where collecting every 15, 20 minutes is fine or something. Can you set those intervals, or is that something that's set within the system itself?
So you can set the global interval, which is typically most folks just leave it at 5 minutes, figuring that's enough visibility. We don't allow for different intervals to be collected, because we figure that just ends up creating a different drumbeat depending upon where you're looking, and we're still going to get the data in enough granularity to solve the problem. And so we kind of look at that and say it really doesn't make much of an impact if you say have everything at a 2-minute pull, if you have everything at a 5-minute pull. And so if you keep everything on that same drumbeat, that means all the data will correlate. And that's really what our correlation engine needs to be able to say, this happened at the same time as this happened along this path. And it just keeps everything aligned.
That makes sense to me. I had a question about your new device detection. So this one's from me. All those were from some other people. New device detection. I mean, is that being driven by like MAC addresses showing up in a switch table? Like what's the underlying tech to discovering a new device on your network that you haven't seen before?
So ARP caches, we're looking at all the layer 3 devices that we're monitoring and checking their ARP caches to say, is there any new MAC address that has never been seen before? And what is that device? What is the MAC address? What is the manufacturer? All of that information about it, as well as, since we have the ARP cache, we know the IP address, and we correlate that with flow information so that we can say very quickly, hey, this MAC address just popped into your network. It has this IP address. These are the ARP caches where it exists. And by the way, these are the flows that it has going to a server in North Korea.
That's a really interesting use case. Like to collect that and start collecting that right away. And I think
up in Amazon's cloud, but same
yeah.
Communications.
Absolutely. So I had one more question about your SIM call simulator. You mentioned, I think you kind of just ran through it quick, that you were going to enable DSCP. Is that something that you can set what markings you want? Is it to EF by default? Because I could see a lot of uses for that where I know it's not how it was designed, but for actually testing that you're getting data through on particular queues. Like if it's something easy to set the DSCP to whatever is relevant for my test. And am I dropping packets? What's the performance like on a particular queue? I could definitely see hacking that and using that for a lot of different things. While it's very cool in its purpose itself of showing you the SIP call capacity and performance from end to end, I think that it would be an interesting little tool to maybe expand, because there's other uses for something like that if you can set the DSCP values.
Yep. You can set the values. And generally what we do is, and I apologize, I didn't have enough time on this presentation, but what I'll do is I'll show off how you can set tags on one call and then set no tags, untagged, on another, and say, let's flood the connection with these untagged data packets and see what happens. You should expect to have packet loss on the untagged packets and no packet loss, no latency, no jitter on the tagged packets. Yeah. And we're able to show whether you're getting proper respect or not by flooding the network with those untagged packets and see what the result is.
Actually validating that your QoS policies are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's really cool.
And then you go into the web side of the product and you can see what's wrong with the QoS tags because we have all of that QoS information presented on the website.
That's very neat. Tony, do you have anything else? Because I've exhausted my list of questions. Not that list has been substantial on its own.
There's no, actually, I just actually want to say that Tim, I saw you guys present at Network Field Day 23, and I really liked you guys' workflow. I liked your overall dashboards and things. And earlier on this show, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I showed off my security and network monitoring platform that I have at my house that I've pieced together from open source tools and security tools and things like that. And I just wanted to say that I liked one of the aspects of your tool so much that I kind of reproduced it in my own way on this end. So, I just wanted to say that's just sort of giving you guys a kudos that you've done something that's really well, and I recognize the value in it. And what it was being able to identify a flow that was violating a security policy based on NetFlow, based on IP address, and being able to drill down into the network and see exactly which port that device was connected to, and just be able to correlate the two very quickly without having to leave your tool. Typically in a SOC or a NOC, that information is in many different tools, and correlating between them. So I kind of like built my own using some open source stuff and logging. But I just wanted to say, that was really cool. And a lot of the integrations that you guys have is really, really good. So I'm happy to have you guys here and demo. And I hope if anyone out there has any questions and wants to see more from Path Solutions, make sure you reach out to Tim. Tim will put your contact information out there, and we'll make sure everyone can find you on Path Solutions. So it's very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you can email me directly at tim@pathsolutions.com or hit our website, www.pathsolutions.com. We have demos up, videos up on our website. You can reach out and end up having a technical presentation by one of our engineers, or if you mention Network Collective, maybe they'll throw me on with you guys. So definitely love to chat with you guys.
All right, last question before we let you go is reporting. Do you guys generate some sort of daily, weekly, monthly reports? Are those generated PDF? Can they be emailed out automatically? Stuff like that. What's your reporting capability?
Yep. So automatically we send out what's called the Daily Network Weather Report. And so this report shows you here are the problems, the problem points on your network, bottlenecks on your network, issues that you ought to be aware of. But on top of that, you can do all sorts of reports, MOS score reports, uptime reports, interface reports. So all sorts of different custom reports available that can be emailed out.
Very cool. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think that we're going to wrap it up there. I think we could probably go on for quite some time asking questions, but I definitely do want to put a wrap on this. Tim, thank you so much for coming on, and also for sponsoring the live stream here. So looking forward to hearing more about it. Anyone who's watching, if you're interested, again, it's www.pathsolutions.com. You see the Twitter hashtag for Path Solutions there. I'm sure you can hit them up there any number of ways. And if you're having trouble getting in touch with them for whatever reason, reach out to me. I'll make sure I make the connection. So thanks again, Tim, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Jordan, Tony, thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks.
That was cool.
Yeah, man. Solutions is a great. I mean, when I saw them at Network Field Day, I got a free trial, and I'm trying to get that in use over at my company's headquarters. We're still a small business, and you're going to still operate out of pretty much 1 or 2 office suites. And this would be because we don't have a NOC or a SOC, and we don't have on-call people. We don't have a full training pipeline to get people to handle our internal stuff. So it's great to put a tool in there that gives you all the visibility from one tool, so you don't have to pivot back and forth. And I think that's great. I really do.
Now, I've seen Path Solutions several times over the past few years, and I've also I've seen it mature. And so it's really interesting to see these tools keep adding and the value keep getting better and better. So every time there's something new or something that's interesting that gets added to the product from the last time that I saw it, that I go, oh, that's a cool little piece. Like I could see where I could use that. And there were a couple here, even though they just presented not that long ago. Yeah.
I like the client executable, the client side executable. I think that's awesome. You know what we used to do? We used to have a flash drive that had like batch scripts on them. And we used to leave them in an office. And when someone had a problem, we would say, go plug this in and then email me the file it puts on your desktop. And it would just
go plug the mystery device into your laptop.
Yep. It would be labeled with our company name, and it'd be taped, and it would be in the drawer of the front desk lady. And she knew what it was. I mean, it was just the simplest way to get people who couldn't scan a piece of paper to give me diagnostics off their machines. Quickest way.
That's cool. So I think we're going to pivot into our next segment here. So Tony, are you ready? Are you ready to shift gears?
Yeah.
Because so let me set the stage here. Tony's going to get a drink first. One of the segments we mentioned at the top of the show is that we want to do war stories, but not just us, not just the two of us, although I'm sure we could occupy the next few months regaling you with all the stories from our careers of all the times that we've either been in dramatically bad or dramatically good situations as network engineers, because we tend to find ourselves in high pressure situations pretty often. But this is actually one of the ways that we want to invite others to come on and share their stories, because you hear from us all the time. And so Tony is going to kick us off. So Tony has a story to share. I'm excited to hear it. I haven't heard the story, so I'm experiencing it right along with everybody else. But I'm planting the seed that if you're watching this and you have a great story that you want to share on the live stream, get in touch with us. If you're a supporter, hit me up in the Slack. If you're not, hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open. You can go to networkcollective.com and there's a way to shoot me an email from the website. Like just get in touch with me and let me know, because we'd love to have people from far and wide come on and share their experiences. Because I think not only is it fun, it's enjoyable to hear the dramatic part of other people's experiences, but we also learn a lot from people who and what they had to walk through themselves. So without any further setting of the stage, Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're gonna put on the highlight, and we're just going to let you roll, man. You ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, there you go, man.
All right. So this war story, this very first one, Tales from the Subnet, is called Reload in 5. We were doing a late night cutover, me and a few other engineers. We were in an office with a few desks and a few cubes. 3 of us stayed late to complete a cutover. It's past midnight at this point. Everyone except us and the front desk security guard had gone home long ago. The motion sensor controlled the overhead lights in the common areas were all off. No one had walked up or down these halls for hours. Only the lights from our monitors and the smell from the late night takeout in the trash and a few curse words leaked out of our room into the hallway. It's coming up on 1 a.m. The combination of coffee and energy drinks is wearing off. We spent most of our night rotating roles with one person in the driver's seat and the rest of us bent over their shoulder, pointing at the monitor, telling them what to do. We were combing over output from show commands and the running config of a remote device. We were struggling to understand why the site hadn't failed over the way it was designed. We printed out the running config on what I felt like was an entire ream of paper. I sat down with some colored highlighters and pencils and started marking up the printed config. It was an absolute spaghetti mess of prefix filtering. Access lists and prefix lists, filtering ingress and filtering egress from specific neighbors and groups, route maps with their own nested prefix lists and access lists applied to other neighbors and some of the same neighbors. It was a big, confusing spaghetti mess with a side of route maps. Once I got it all color-coded, I had a good model in my head of what this config was doing. There was one line of BGP config that stood out to me. It was one that I didn't know at the time and have since learned this was the source of our problem. While I wasn't exactly sure what it did at the time, the structure of the command and the elements it was linked to sort of painted a picture of what was expected. I pointed this out to the other engineers working that night, and no one could recall how that got there, when that got there, or what it did. And they were all looking at me to be the one to figure it out. Well, we discussed our options, and we had only one choice. Just like a medical surgeon would, I suggested, let's rip it out and see if that fixes anything. All the network engineers listening to this know that just ripping something out is a very risky maneuver, and one that should only be executed under very dire circumstances. The box we were remoted into was down the street in one of the primary data centers. This data center was inside of a government facility, a facility that takes physical security very serious. There were a number of checkpoints and gates to get into the building, and once in the building, there was an armored door with a large combination lock to let you into the man trap before you could get into the data center. And this was the data center that none of us had access to. We were at the office building about 15 minutes down the way. In preparing for this configuration change, we were going to use the Cisco safety net, reload in 5. This is the command you run when you're making changes on a remote box that might cut off your connectivity. After making your change, if you don't cancel the reload, the device will reboot from the last saved startup config. This is very handy if you do it right. One of my colleagues sat down at the driver's seat. He rested his hands on the keyboard, ready to type. The rest of us are all huddled over his shoulder, watching the cursor on the screen pulse as he typed in every letter. We were desperately hoping by removing the then unknown BGP command, it would resolve our failover problem and we could get going with our project. But first, we needed to set the safety net. So he started typing reload in 5, except he didn't type reload space in space 5. Instead, he typed reload space IN5. Now on modern iOS and iOS XE, this isn't an issue. Cisco will throw an error and tell you your command syntax is wrong. But older iOS, 12.2 and before, anything that came after the reload statement, if it wasn't already a valid option, was treated as a comment or a reason. In this case, reload space in 5 immediately reloads the box with the reason in 5. So my colleague types reload space in 5. Not realizing his typo, he quickly hits enter. The pulsing cursor had stopped blinking on the screen, and I think my heart did the same. This is exactly what we didn't want to happen. Within a few seconds, our remote SSH session was closed, and the box remained unpingable for more than 10 minutes. That's how my night started, and we were only getting started. Under normal circumstances, this would be a brief unplanned outage for the remote site. When the device boots back up, it would boot up from its last save config, and we would log in and pick up where we left off, under normal circumstances. But in our circumstances, the remote device was an old Cisco 6509 with the firewall services module. And for some reason, all the sites that had this card often failed on reboot. You had to complete the right combination of removing the firewall services module and reseating it and rebooting it in the proper order to get the device to fire up properly. So, no problem. The data center is only 15 minutes away. Someone could go over there, reseat the card, and we'd be back up and running. Oh, right. None of us have access, and it's behind an armored door on government property. There's no way we're getting to this device. It's nearly 2 a.m. at this point, and we're tired. All of our POCs who would have had access to that data center are all asleep. They weren't supposed to be on call this night because we weren't planning to make changes to their site. One of the last POCs who had access to the facility was still up. He was out that night hopping from water hole to water hole. We had to explain the situation to him, and he called a cab over to the data center right away. He was in good spirits and thought that the mess that we got ourselves in was funny. One of our engineers met him at the data center to reseat the card and reboot the box. The card was reseated, and it didn't want to reboot. He tried and tried and tried. We still had a full night's worth of work ahead of us, and it's nearly 2 a.m. Our heads are getting fuzzy, and we're still trying to resurrect this equipment so we can get on and do a proper failover. Aha, an idea. We recently decommissioned another 6509 at our local facility. If we could swap this firewall services module card for that card, it just might work. So we had someone run the board over there to swap it out. He tried to reboot it, and again, it didn't work. He tried and tried and tried again. We had an open conference line going between us and the remote hands at the data center reseating the card, but I couldn't hear their voices. All I could hear was the voice in my head planning how I was going to tell leadership that we had failed, and that by continuing to push forward in this cutover, it left us in a far worse posture than if we stopped hours ago. In my head, I started asking myself questions and doing an analysis of how could I have let this get so bad? What could I have done differently? And my thoughts were interrupted by someone shouting from behind me. And even though I heard each of the words, they weren't computing as fast as they were being said. I managed to carve out the two words that mattered the most to me at the time. I'm in. Finally, someone shouted from behind me, the SSH session to the remote 6509 is up. Wow, even though we were now only at the starting line, again, 6 hours later, this felt like a victory. Once everything came back online, we completed the removal of the BGP advertise map command that caused our trouble. The site failed over correctly. We finished our cutover before any of the organization's employees came into work that morning. It was a crazy night for all of us. We all worked a day shift that day and didn't expect to be working all night for this cutover. To this day, the joke remains and is still shared by those of us who were there. Before you make any changes to a device, they must reload in 5.
So first off, there's so many lessons to be learned from that. I want to unpack that a little bit. So many lessons to be learned. First is physical access, right?
Break it down.
Yeah. So first is physical access. I'm looking at that and I'm saying, I've done that before. Like I've made changes on systems where I've gone in and I didn't think about whether or not I had that physical access or not, and ended up biting me. That's a big deal.
And you know what? During working hours, it's not that big a deal. Someone can just go over there and do it.
Right. You have to take that into consideration.
Network outages and network maintenance happens at night, when no one's working at 2 a.m.
Right. Exactly.
When remote hands aren't available.
Exactly. And so that one definitely stood out to me. Something you said in there was hilarious. You said, like a surgeon, let's just rip it out and see what happens. I don't want to hang out with your medical professionals, let me tell you.
I'm not a doctor, but I'll take a look.
I've heard of this. Now, I never ran into it myself because I was cautioned against it. This reload and then the message kind of being just a whatever, and that not really being a viable. You have to be very careful to type reload in 5, which is funny because I think probably most people listening to the show have never probably experienced that, because that's a relatively old version of code. Now, granted, it's running
it was an old 6509. Yeah.
It's running on a 6500, so maybe because of the fact it's a 6500, some people, but that's man, oops. And there's no fallback. Yeah. There's no, it just makes me think about the times that I've, accidentally reloaded the wrong box because I was on the wrong CLI or whatever. Like there's any number of things that can happen there. So I think I'm going to have to I'm going to prepare myself for these, because I think we're going to have these where it's just like, that story gave me anxiety for you as you're telling it. Cause I'm like, yeah, that completely could happen. I definitely can relate with that for sure.
So there were a number of sort of life lessons. That was a growing point for me, for sure. Doing a lot of cutovers back to back, and they all have sort of their own stories, but that one was tough because of the isolation, because we weren't supposed to be making configuration changes to that site. We weren't doing anything with that site. Right. The backstory to that is we were doing something with our site, and they had our backdoor link. And so when we take our site down, they were supposed to start advertising our prefix. And because of an advertised map, it's looking for this, this loopback that doesn't matter, and whether it's advertised or not, then it starts spitting out the prefix. and it never worked. And at the time, I didn't know what an
Right.
advertised map was at that time. And it was just one of those things where I've seen, at that time, hundreds of router configs, and I've never seen that line before. So I didn't know what it did. And that ended up being our problem. As soon as we pulled that out, the site failed over, we were good to go. And we did the rest of our cutover, but it sucked.
I can definitely imagine.
Yeah.
So we have one more thing left for tonight, man.
Yeah. Let's
We
do
have
it.
one more thing left for tonight. So we have Naked Hardware now. I'm not going to show them yet because I'm still working on. I'm not going to show them yet. But one of the things that we're doing as we develop these segments in these shows is we want logos and kind of like some stingers between these segments. We started to do some trials with some different designers and whatever, specifically with Naked Hardware, just because, wow, there's a lot of opportunity to either have some fun or go completely in the wrong direction with that one. And I love what we ended up with. But I'm gonna hold that in my back pocket until we get just a little bit further. So no reveal of the graphics or the stinger today. But Tony, are you prepared? Do you have? We don't have one from our last show, right? Because we took a break.
That's right.
So this one is just going to be an introduction now. Let's just kind of like reestablish the rules. If you're here and you're here and you're watching, what this is we're going to show you a device. The device is going to have the cover off. It's just the inner guts of something. It could be, it's most likely going to be a network device, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be that way. It's just going to be a technology device, something you probably could find the answer to. Maybe you know it off the top of your head if you're like Tony, and this is the first thing you do when you get a piece of gear into the office. But we're going to show this picture. Now, I know the impulse is to respond in the chat on YouTube or wherever you're at, but that's not what we're paying attention to. If you know what the device is, you're going to have to go to Twitter. And on Twitter, you're going to have to use the Network Collective hashtag or at us, right? At Net Collective PC. Yep. Either way is fine. Yep. But ultimately on Twitter, we want an answer for what this device type is. Now, I haven't seen Chris Cummings in the chat, which means everybody else has a chance tonight because he's won pretty much all of them. So let's, with that in mind, Tony, what I'm going to do, you want me to share your desktop? Is that what we're doing here?
Yep. Go ahead. Share my desktop. So we're just going to do this briefly and then I'm going to take it down. All right. Here's our device. Lovely device. Nice. If I can zoom in, nice high quality picture. There it is. I'm going to zoom it out and I'm going to post this to the Network Collective, Twitter feed. Okay. With a Naked Hardware post, and anyone who wants to take a guess can go ahead and take a guess. And, you can guess more than once if you want, but, and you know what, share it out. Say, does anyone know what this hardware is? And retweet it out there. And it'll be a lot of fun. And so what we'll do is next week, week at the end of our show, when we introduce we'll give the answer to this one and we'll announce the winners. We'll find the people who answered correctly. And then we'll introduce a new piece of Naked Hardware, a new device without its clothes on.
Absolutely. All right. So you got it from there. And the only other caveat, we should point this out just to make sure that it's fair and everyone knows what's going on. We will do our best to get it to you, but if it's international, we may not be able to ship it, just depending on logistics and all of that. So this may be limited to just the US, but play anyway. And if we can ship it, we will. And if not, we'll find some way to be equitable about it. If you're overseas, we'll find some way to make it good. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right.
It.
So I think that's it. I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Thanks again to Past Solutions and Tim Titus for coming on and showing what they've got going on. Equally so for sponsoring this live stream so that we can continue to develop it into what we want it to be. Seriously, I can't express it enough. They took a risk, right? So we have the podcast. And the podcast is established, right? We have a certain number of listeners who listen all the time. The live stream is not something we've done a ton of. We started it late last year. It's still new. It's still developing. We're still growing the audience. We're still getting, our feet under us. And so Tim has partnered with us. So I just I want to call that out because it's really cool for a company. Typically when you go in and have these conversations, it's kind of hey, what metrics can you provide me? And I've on this, it's Not much. Like, this is my plan. This is my goal. This is what I want to make it to be. So it's not just that Past Solutions wants to get in front of our audience. That's not just it. They really believe in what we're doing, and they think that this is going to work, and they think that this is a cool avenue. So I definitely wanted to call out the fact that it's, even more than someone sponsoring Network Collective, which is always a cool thing. This one's a bit unique. So I definitely wanted to call out for that extra attention. The demo today was cool. It was definitely worthwhile. I don't think we mentioned it at the top. One of the segments we want to do is we regularly want to demo tools. Now, it won't always be a sponsored tool like this. Like, that's going to happen, once in a quarter, right? For someone who sponsors the live stream. But we're talking about open source tools. So if there's specific tools that you want us to demo in a similar fashion to what we just did, where we can sit down and look at it, maybe it might be Tony or myself, or maybe we could bring on the developer or bring on somebody who's working on that tool to show it off, or maybe somebody who's just used it a lot. To show us how to do some particular things, let us know. Feed those to us, because we'd love to get relevant info out there.
Yep, and we got a long list of tool suggestions that we've come up with ourselves, and with a couple of close people that shared stuff with us. But if anyone has any suggestions for tools that you guys use, your favorite bookmarks, things online, free, open source, anything like that, and send them this way. I mean, this is how we share information, and we want to share really cool stuff with the community. And we got a long list, but we'd love to add new stuff to it. So anything you have, send it our way.
Absolutely. I'm not gonna belabor the regular points. If you follow us, you know where to find us. NetworkCollective.com, @NetCollectivePC on Twitter. If you are not a supporter of the show and you like what we do, please consider supporting us. It's not expensive. It's $5 a month. You get access to the Slack, and it's a pretty cool thing, and it helps us out a lot. Obviously, if you haven't yet, YouTube, subscribe. Hit the bell. I'm awful at this. I'm not a YouTuber. But do all the
subscribe,
things.
Hit the bell.
Yeah, do everything that all the other YouTubers say you should do for our channel. So that you get notified when we're streaming. We're definitely targeting doing this every Wednesday. But it's not going to be every single Wednesday. So we're going to set up those streams. You get notifications. We'll be doing it on social media. So follow us there so you know when we're going to be live. Other than that, I think I'm good, man. Like, this was a lot of fun. I've missed it. So a couple of weeks out, now we're back. Yeah. And I'm really excited for the stuff we have coming. It's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, the next couple of weeks is going to be very cool of show content. So this is going to be awesome. I love it. Thank you to everyone who's out there watching. Really awesome. Thank you for being so chatty in the chat. For once, I actually had the YouTube chat open. Maybe you guys don't realize, but like most of the streams, I just forget to pull the chat up. And so I'm just relying on you to put stuff on the screen. But this time I actually had the chat up. It's a lot of fun hanging out in the chat. So if you're seeing this on a later recording, a later release or something, you got to get in the chat. You got to be live. This is where all the action's at.
I get to follow it and bring some of the stuff into the show. So I get to see all the comments, and I like when I get mocked for, mocking the fact that it's the year of the Linux desktop again. Yes, I see you. Usually just people try to give me a hard time. Laz says that he intentionally tries to make me chuckle, is what he said. That's his goal for every show. You failed this time, Laz. You did not make me chuckle. You'll have to try harder next time. But yeah, so anyway, so absolutely the chat's lots of fun. And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks again, and we will see you next time.